All right, folks, today we're going to begin Unit 7, Imperialism and Progressivism. And today we're going to be talking about the Progressive Era. Now, a few things. First off, imperialism. What does imperialism mean? What does it mean when we're talking about imperialism? Yeah.
We're talking in general?
In general, what is imperialism?
I guess you go to another country and you take what they have.
Yeah, you take over other countries. And so, who are we going to be talking about with regard to imperialism in this coming unit? European imperialism. No. Because this, I'll give you a hint, folks. You are currently taking United States history. Based on that clue, whose imperialist history will we start delving into in Unit 7? Not Canada either, but American history. Or American imperialism. So in this unit, folks, we'll be talking about American imperialism. Because, folks, we know America is a global power today, right? But up through Unit 6, have we seen America emerge as this global power? No. They've dabbled with the Mexican-American War and whatever else, but have they really made a big stand on the global stage? That's going to happen in this unit. In this unit, America is going to take the world stage, and they're going to start dictating. They're going to start telling Europe how to govern the world. They'll start telling Europe, what's theirs. And so America is going to take more of an assertive role in Unit 7. But we're also going to talk about progressivism in this unit. When we're talking about progressivism, folks, what is the root word of progressivism? Progress. Progress is the root word of progressivism. So because we're talking about the progressive era today, we're going to start off with that. But by the way, folks, look at the date. We're now in the 20th century. We've jumped the hurdle. Now we're very, very close to modern day. So we've leaped that hurdle. This is still last century, though, folks. This is not our current century, because we're now in the 2000s. But we're going to talk about the last century now. It's pretty crazy. So what is progressivism is the question. As we know, folks, the root word of progressivism is progress. So, someone who believes in progress believes in what? Improvement. Someone who believes in progressivism, folks, or someone who is a progressive, is someone who believes in social reform, who promotes social reform. That is a progressive, and that is what the progressive era is all about. And the progressive era, folks, will last from 1901 to 1918. Why did it stop in 1918? What kind of got in the way or distracted us? World War I. So World War I will happen. World War I really begins in 1914, but America doesn't really get involved in 1917, and we don't really get involved until 1918. But so the progressive era will last from 1901 to 1918. And in this era, we're promoting social reform. Now, was there another period in American history in which we focused a lot of our energy and time on social reform?
Southern Reconstruction?
Huh?
Southern Reconstruction?
Southern Reconstruction, that was specific after the Civil War, so I'll take that definitely. But was there another period of time in which we focused on, women's rights and whatever else? Yeah, Abel. The antebellum era and the Second Great Awakening. So, folks, this time period is largely influenced by antebellum reforms of the 1840s. Now, in the 1840s, folks, what were we trying to do? Weren't we also trying to fix society? What were some of the reforms of the 1840s? Just based on the images you see here. Women's suffrage, definitely. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Seneca Falls. Yeah, prison reforms, right? Mental health reforms, promoted by who? Dorothea Dix, good. And what else did we try to fix? Temperance movement. So all of these reforms we were fighting for back in the 1840s. Did we succeed at any of them? Well, we got this mental health reform stuff, but did we succeed in all of them? Did we get women's right to vote in the 1840s? Did we end temperance in the 1840s? Or did we achieve temperance? No. And so we're fighting for all these reforms, and they have yet to be achieved. Did we succeed in them in the 1880s and 1890s during the Gilded Age? When we tried to fight for them again? No. And in the Gilded Age, were there new problems in America? Yeah, folks. Not only are we facing old problems, but there are now new problems in America of the 20th century. These were problems that emerged during the Gilded Age. So what problems do we see here emerging during the Gilded Age that have yet to be fixed?
Boss tweet one.
Okay, so you see boss tweets, so that you see a lot of political corruption. That's definitely a problem. You see the sense of a laissez-faire government, so people don't like that because it's a government that does nothing. What other problems do we have in America at this time? Poverty is a serious problem. Overpopulation, right? Definitely overpopulation is an issue. How are people living, folks? See a lot of people living in slums. That's a serious concern. And a lot of these are problems of what? What caused a lot of these problems? What caused overpopulation in the cities and poor working conditions? Immigration might be one factor. But what else is causing these problems in the city? Why aren't we having these problems on farms? What's happening in the city? Factories, yeah, what do we call that? Industrialization. So you have problems of industrialization. And what else is a major problem in society at this time?
Monopolies and trusts.
Monopolies and trusts. People are being taken advantage of by monopolies and trusts. So these are all problems you guys are familiar with already, yes? We reviewed these issues already. We know that they exist. We haven't tackled them yet, but they're there. And so what's going to happen is, are progressives going to be content with these problems? No. They're going to say, whoa, we need to change this because social reform is a possibility. And so in this new era, you have the emergence of progressives who are fed up with these problems. So today, folks, we're going to talk about progressivism at the municipal and state level. Now, there's the federal level, which is the same as what? We're talking about federal, we're talking about changes where? Nationwide, that's the federal level, national level. State level is what? The state level. Right? There's no other word for state. What about municipal? What are we talking about when we say municipal? City level. So I know this is a word that I've talked about multiple times already. I want to revisit it again. Make sure you understand the word municipal, because a lot of the times on multiple choice questions, kids will run to the word municipal and say, Mr. King, I didn't know what they were talking about because I don't know what the word municipal means. It means the city. It means county, city. It means local government is what municipal means. Cool? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about progressivism at the municipal and state level. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. First off, what do progressives believe in? These ladies, these progressives, what do they believe in? I'll tell you what they believe in, so you don't have to guess. First off, they're optimistic. Why do you have to be an optimist to be a progressive? You have to see the potential, right? Would emo kids be progressive? No, they'd be like, society sucks. It's always going to be that way because society's terrible, like my soul. You know, like really dark stuff. But optimists, what do they see in society? They see the good. They see the potential. And so you have to be an optimist to be progressive. To be a teacher, folks, you have to be somewhat optimistic. You're not going to be a teacher like, I'm going to make society exactly the same when I become a teacher. But to be a teacher, you have to be optimistic about life. Otherwise, You'd be like, I'm going to make sure I maintain the status quo for everyone. Why would you do that as a teacher? You also believe in an economy for small business and consumers, which means, who are progressives trying to fight against? Trusts and monopolies. We believe this is a society for small businesses, not for the big companies. So again, if you're a progressive today, don't shop at Carl's Jr. for your burgers. Go to J&B or Doubles, those local family-owned ones. Or that one down the street in Hacienda that I don't see anyone ever go to. Vinny Valley Burgers? No, the one before that. Like across from Doubles. Yeah, Troy. I've never been there. Exactly. Also, they believe that society was responsible for the individual. They believe that society was responsible for the individual. Folks, in the Gilded Age, who survived? The wealthy, the rich. Because they believed in what? What was that philosophy they believed in during the Gilded Age? That only the wealthy survived. What is that idea? It's Darwinism. They believed in social Darwinism. But in a progressive world, who gets to survive? Everyone gets to survive. In the Gilded Age, if I'm lying in the gutter, down on my luck, about to die, what does someone in the Gilded Age say? Sucks for you. You weren't strong enough. But in a progressive age, what do we say to that man lying in the gutter? Let's get you some help. You have an opportunity too. So they're fighting against that survival of the fittest, us against the world kind of mentality. They also promoted government intervention and social welfare. So what are they fighting against? This idea of what? Well, first I'll talk about government intervention. They're fighting against what idea? Laissez-faire. They say, no, laissez-faire? You want a government that does nothing? No. You want a government that gets involved. And why do progressives want a government that gets involved?
Because it creates progress.
It creates progress. It can fix those issues, right? It can fix all those problems in society. And they promoted social welfare. What is social welfare? Helping the poor, helping the people. Like, what are forms of social welfare today? Food stamps is an example. What other examples maybe of social welfare? EBT cards. What about healthcare? Is healthcare considered social welfare now? As of January 1st, many people with Affordable Health Care Act, that's part of the social welfare net now. Healthcare for those that need it, that can't afford it. And so, should people have these things according to a progressive? Because again, it falls back into the idea again of who's responsible for the individual? All of us. Should the poor be forced to fend for themselves? No. We help each other. They hated a laissez-faire government, which is not surprising. If you wrote that down already, you should be fine. And they believed that women were capable of reforming society. Not that men were incapable, but that the women also have a role to play. Yes, they did. And what maybe inspired this idea of women being able to play a role? Seneca Falls played a role. What other ideas? Have women had experience already being involved? Social reforms, antebellum reforms, the idea of Republican motherhood. These are all things that women have had experience with already. So they said, hey, let's keep the ball rolling. We're slowly moving towards women playing a larger role. Why not now? Today, folks, it's interesting because this idea of laissez-faire government. Democrats today would be considered the progressives of today because they don't want a laissez-faire government. They want things like Obamacare. Republicans do not want that. So today, Democrats would be the ones that want big government, and Republicans want small government. Does that make sense? They want a government that does not really get involved. But that's true when it comes to like social welfare programs. But that's not true of things like the NSA and spying. Because Democrats don't like a big government that, reads your emails, but Republicans do. So it's not as clear and black and white as politics used to be. It's very vague and very specific depending on what social welfare programs are offered and how big government is and where it is. So it gets complicated. But anyway, does everyone have a pretty good idea of what a progressive believed in? Okay. So these are the basic progressive beliefs. So the question now is, who were the progressives? Who actually took on these values and tried to change society? Well, there are several groups, but the first group we're going to be talking about today that took on these progressive values were the muckrakers. So let's talk about the muckrakers first today. Muckrakers. They were amongst the progressives. So my question now is this: What is a muckraker? I mean, is this a muckraker? Likely not. So when we're talking about muck, I'm not talking about the Pokemon Muck, which many of you immediately thought of. A muck. What is muck? When you think of something like it's like muck, what does that mean? Like dirty, gross, right? So someone that rakes muck. Not a farmer. A muckraker is an investigative journalist. Because what are they doing? Someone who investigates and reports on it, what do we say that they're doing? They're digging up dirt. Does that make sense, folks? Yeah. So the name that they've been given is muckraker. They're an investigative journalist because they're digging up dirt. That's why they're called muckrakers. Now, these investigative journalists, they reported the really serious stories because there's journalists and then there's investigative journalists, right? Like when you go home and you turn on the news, like Channel 5, News at 5, there's a story of a cat stuck in a tree. And he was saved by a firefighter. Is that investigative journalism? Yes. No, that's like fluff news stories. But then there's a story about the NSA spying and reading your emails. Is that investigative journalism? Mm-hmm. Sure. Unless, it depends. If like the cat was like a spy cat, and like it was in North Korea, and it was trapped there, and therefore was rescued by like military firemen, but it was a story that was kept secret, then perhaps that could be considered investigative journalism. But it depends. It's a very rare occurrence. Muckrakers were investigative journalists, and they would write their stories in several magazines, folks. Two really famous muckraking magazines were McClure's and Collier's. So you should be familiar with McClure's and Collier's as two examples of national muckraking magazines. Like you guys read like National Geographic, you read all these stories of like nature and whatever else. McClure's and Collier's were about investigative stories, like the dirt in America is what they were about. One other really good example, Cosmopolitan. I know like a fashion magazine today, but back then like the dirtiest stories in the world of like corruption. Because now it's like a little bit of corruption and more like what handbag is appropriate for like this season. But before, corruption. In any case, folks, these were very serious magazines. And the examples of muckrakers include Ida Tarbell. Ida Tarbell was a muckraker that uncovered corruption at Standard Oil. Ida Tarbell, she uncovered corruption at Standard Oil. Now, who owns Standard Oil? Rockefeller. Rockefeller owned Standard Oil. And people were not shocked, let's say, because Rockefeller believed in that rule or ruin. He was kind of a ruthless kind of guy. But the reason why this is so important is that she was able to uncover evidence about Rockefeller's corruption, bribing government officials, threatening people with their lives, that kind of thing. Now, is it pretty risky to go up against John D. Rockefeller?
Yes.
He might kill you. He's one of the most powerful men in the world. He owns 90% of American oil. So if you make John D. Rockefeller mad, might he come after you? So Ida Tarbell risked her life. She went undercover and worked at Standard Oil and was able to reveal all these serious corrupt circumstances in Standard Oil. And it was a pretty big story, folks, uncovering what was happening at Standard Oil. But again, is that investigative journalism? Almost definitely. Another example, Lincoln Steffens. He wrote The Shame of the Cities. And The Shame of the Cities was about what, you think? It's about municipal corruption. It's about municipal corruption. The city corruption. Why would that be good, though, to know that there's corruption in your cities? What could you then do as a progressive if you know that your government was being corrupt? You could protest, and what else could you do differently? How would you fix corruption in your local government? Vote for different people, right? You say, hey, if you're going to continue to be corrupt, I'm going to vote for someone else. And so he uncovered all the political corruption of people like Boss Tweed and other political machines. Then you had Frank Norris, and here in this very sexy picture that I found of him, who wrote The Octopus and the Pit.
What?
That look in his eyes like, why, hello. Have you read The Octopus and the Pit? Come closer. The Octopus, you don't really have to know so much about The Pit, but The Octopus was a book that criticized what? In the last unit when we talked about in the Gilded Age, we used the octopus to be a metaphor for what?
The vertical
Trusts and monopolies, exactly. Vertical integration, horizontal integration. But it was a book that criticized monopolies. And here again you see Frank Norris using the octopus as a metaphor that criticized monopolies. By the way, Frank Norris, in no relation to Chuck Norris. So, no relation whatsoever. So despite, I know you're hoping, but no. Still, though, Frank Norris, despite math's laws, is still able to divide by zero. Frank Norris also destroyed the periodic table because he only believed in the element of surprise.
Oh.
And if Frank Norris has $5 and you have $5, Frank Norris still has more money. Because he's Frank Norris. For those that have no idea what I'm talking about, those are just Chuck Norris jokes transcribed to fit Frank Norris. No relation. Another famous muckraker at the time is John Spargo, who wrote The Bitter Cry of the Children. What do you think this book was about?
How children
Child labor. Child labor. So as you guys are writing that down, I'm going to read you guys 2 excerpts from The Bitter Cry of the Children. Listen closely. Work in the coal breakers is exceedingly hard and dangerous. Crouched over the chutes, the boys sit hour after hour picking out the pieces of slate and other refuse from the coal as it rushes past to the washers. From the cramped position they have to assume, most of them become more or less deformed and bent-backed like old men. When a boy has been working for some time and begins to get round-shouldered, his fellows say that he's got his boy to carry round wherever he goes. So what's happening to these kids? You're getting deformed. Because if you're a young kid, folks, is your body still growing? And if you're hunched over every day for like 8 to 12 hours, is that going to form your spine in that way? And that's what's happening to these kids. They're developing bent over backs because they're working like this day after day after day. The coal is hard and accidents to the hands, such as cut, broken, or crushed fingers, are common among the boys. Sometimes there is a worse accident. A terrified shriek is heard, and a boy is mangled and torn in the machinery, or disappears in the chute to be picked out later smothered and dead. Clouds of dust fill the breakers and are inhaled by the boys, laying the foundations for asthma and miners' consumption. So one, you can be crushed in the coal breaking machines, or as you're shoveling the coal down the chutes, you might actually fall into it and get crushed by another layer of coal right on top of you. And as you're uncovering the coal, you might find children inside. That's on top of the black lung and the asthma and all the other problems that come with it. So again, serious problems here? Most definitely. So, why was muckraking so significant, folks? Muckraking was significant because it exposed the social inequalities of society. It exposed the social inequalities of society. It exposed the social inequalities of society. Why is that important? Why was it so important for the muckrakers to be doing this? What did it do? It let people know. It informed people. Because could people at this time say, I didn't know? Was that a justified excuse? But with McClure's colleagues and all these other muckrakers, could people continue to sit naively and stand idly by and do nothing? Now it was their fault. If you continue to do nothing, you can't say you didn't know. You know. And so it exposed those social inequalities to inform the public. And the other thing is that, did everyone's children work this way? Well, some of them just had really no idea whatsoever that kids had to work in this kind of back-breaking labor. It also paved the way for social reform. So it created or allowed for social reforms. Because now do we know what the problems are? Yes. Now that they've been identified by the muckrakers, we now can begin social reform movements. Cool? Questions? Comments? Everyone good with the muckrakers? Understand what they did? Uncovered all the problems of the city? Cool. Cool. Moving on. The second group of people then, of progressives, were middle-class women. Because what did the muckrakers do? What was their job? Expose the problem. What are middle-class women going to do? They're going to fix it. That was their role. So middle-class women begin to get more involved. And they're largely inspired by who? I mean, weren't women already involved in social movements already? Yeah. What movement was that? Just recently. In the Gilded Age. What movement were women already involved in trying to help the poor immigrant communities? The settlement house movement. So these middle-class women were largely inspired by Jane Addams and Hull House and the settlement house movement. Largely inspired by them. So they were inspired by Jane Addams and Florence Kelley and the settlement house movement because weren't they already doing work like this somewhat? Now they're going to be more focused on their goals. But let me read this quote to you guys first. I want you to read it quietly to yourself a second time. And then I want you to talk to your partner and tell me what argument is Florence Kelley making. So let me read it first. Knowing as educators do that thousands of the city youth will enter factory life at an early age, as early as a state law will permit. Instructed as the modern teacher is to youth's requirements for normal mental and muscular development, it is hard to understand the apathy in regard to the youth's inevitable experience in modern industry. Are the educators like the rest of us so caught in admiration of astonishing achievements of modern industry that they forget the children themselves. So read this quote to yourself one more time, and then talk to the person next to you and see if you guys can figure out, what is Florence Kelly trying to say about children and industry? So read it to yourself one more time and see if you can figure out, what is she trying to say about children and industry? And then talk to a partner.
Saying that we are so focused on growing our industry that we are even involving and we're forgetting to let them grow education but instead we are using our industry that we are and we don't care about this. It's like totally different.
Like 20 more seconds. Okay, let's see. What is Florence Kelly trying to say about children here? Elena.
That adults don't really care about the children's body development, and they only care about developmental improvements and those sort of things.
Yeah, all they care about is technology. What about the children who are being sacrificed to like the altar of technology? So they're wondering, why are we not caring about child labor? Are you so impressed by the building of a skyscraper that you forget what is required to build that skyscraper? Your kid is working in a coal mine right now. Is that worth it so you can build a 30-story building? So people are upset, they're frustrated, and they're complaining about it. And that's what they say. Okay. So we're going to end there today, folks.